This man has his own science. Here he comes again. The words, spoken with mocking sarcasm, floated through the busy office. Kevin, a senior official in the department, didn't worry about his remark being overheard. He was among colleagues, people who shared his doubts about the department's leadership, or so he thought. What Kevin didn't realize was that Robert F. Kennedy himself heard the remark. The Secretary of Health and Food Department had passed by at just the right moment, catching Kevin's words that carried more weight than Kevin even realized. To understand this moment, we need to look at the months leading up to it. Kevin's frustrations didn't come out of nowhere. They were a reaction to changes, sweeping, rapid changes, that Kennedy had brought to the department since taking the helm. When Kennedy was appointed secretary, he inherited a department that was stagnant. Programs were outdated. Policies had been recycled for years without sufficient updates, and morale was low. Public health initiatives often stalled in bureaucratic processes, while critics from outside labeled the department inefficient. Foods passed safety checks based on guidelines that hadn't been revised in decades, ignoring modern science that highlighted emerging risks. It was a system that needed a shakeup, and Kennedy came in as the man ready to deliver it. From his first day, Kennedy made it clear that business as usual was a thing of the past. He began enacting reforms that many saw as bold, innovative, and necessary. But not everyone agreed. For some of the department's veterans, individuals like Kevin, Kennedy's approach felt brash, maybe even arrogant. Kevin, in particular, had spent decades working his way up. He had grown comfortable with the tried-and-true methods. He saw himself as a gatekeeper of sorts, someone who had mastered the specialized knowledge required to maintain the department's operations. To Kevin, Kennedy's reforms felt like a rejection of everything he and his colleagues had worked for. What irritated Kevin and others most wasn't just the scale of change, but Kennedy's conviction that these changes were non-negotiable. One policy that triggered particular disdain was a reform of food safety standards. The new guidelines proposed by Kennedy's team would overhaul long-standing practices, cutting back on chemical additives, imposing stricter pesticide limits, and introducing penalties for companies flouting transparency rules. Kennedy cited research indicating long-term health concerns caused by certain chemicals in the food supply, research that had only recently gained traction in scientific communities. But to Kevin, who had worked under the older rules, it felt unnecessary. "This has worked for decades," Kevin had argued in a heated meeting months earlier. "Do you mean to tell us that everything we've been doing is worthless? These studies you keep mentioning, they're not even globally accepted. It feels like you're making policy based on personal theories, not established science." Kennedy had looked at Kevin evenly, his voice calm but firm. "We are public servants," he had said. "Our duty is to adapt as better information comes to light, even if it challenges long-standing norms. What was acceptable 10 years ago may no longer be acceptable now. The science I'm following isn't mine, Kevin. It's research conducted by leading experts in the field. If we don't move forward, we stagnate, and that's a disservice to every citizen who trusts us to protect their health." The tension between Kevin and Kennedy only grew from there. Over the weeks, Kevin quietly began questioning almost every directive Kennedy issued, interpreting the changes as Kennedy's way of flexing his authority. Kevin wasn't alone in these thoughts, though he was often the most vocal. The office became a place divided. Younger staff members and those who had grown frustrated with the old inefficiencies supported Kennedy's vision. Meanwhile, others like Kevin, who felt disrespected by the rapid dismissal of long-standing practices, became increasingly resistant. And this was the context that led to Kevin's remarks that morning. When Kennedy walked through the office that day, he represented everything Kevin questioned and resented: the uncertainty of change and the loss of what felt familiar and reliable. Kevin's casual mockery, "This man has his own science, here he comes again," wasn't just annoyance. It was layered with the frustration of seeing everything he knew challenged by someone who, in Kevin's eyes, had too much confidence in experiments over experience. Kennedy didn't stop. didn't acknowledge Kevin's comment at that moment. He continued walking through the office like nothing had happened. But Kevin's words echoed in his mind. He wasn't angry, at least not in the conventional sense. What troubled him more was how such comments reflected something deeper, an attitude that was harmful not just to him, but to the department's mission. Kennedy believed in leading by principle, and he couldn't ignore this moment. Later that day, an unexpected meeting was scheduled. Kevin walked into the conference room with a mix of curiosity and unease. Most of the senior officials were gathered there. Kennedy began speaking, and though his tone was calm, the weight of his words was unmistakable. He started with the bigger picture, emphasizing the department's mission and the gravity of their responsibilities. This department exists not for us, but for the people who rely on the safety of their food and the reliability of public health systems, Kennedy began. Everything we do, every policy we enact, has consequences far bigger than ourselves. That's why respect, for the science, for the team, and for the mission, is non-negotiable. And then, without directly naming Kevin, Kennedy addressed the comment. I overheard something this morning, a remark that suggested the work we do here is based on personal ideology rather than sound facts. Words like that don't just undermine me as a leader, they undermine the entire team, the very foundation of trust that holds us together. Challenges and disagreements are expected, but they must come from a place of respect. The room was tense but silent. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but said nothing. Kennedy's next words stunned the group. Effective immediately, he said, his voice unshaken. I'll be relieving one of you from your responsibilities. This decision isn't about punishing words. It's about ensuring that our team operates with integrity. Respect and trust are requirements for this department, not optional values. Kennedy didn't deliver the news with harshness or arrogance, but with a firmness that left no room for argument. When he called Kevin's name, the senior official froze. Kevin's immediate reaction was to argue, to insist the comment wasn't serious, just playful banter. But Kennedy didn't waver. Attitudes matter just as much as actions, he said. If we allow even minor breaches of respect to go unchecked, they grow. Words have power. Trust me when I say, this decision isn't personal. It's about protecting the standards we need to operate at our highest potential. The dismissal sent ripples through the department. While some feared it might silence constructive criticism, others saw it as a bold move, one that set a standard for respect and accountability. For Kevin, the fallout was personal. He left the office that day angry, embarrassed, and convinced Kennedy had gone too far. But as the days passed, anger gave way to reflection. At first, Kevin sifted through the notes and documents Kennedy's policies were based on, determined to find cracks in the logic. Instead, he began to see what he'd missed before, a well-thought-out approach grounded in legitimate data and expertise. Kevin started re-examining his own role in the situation. He realized that he hadn't truly engaged with Kennedy's vision. Instead, he had resisted out of a discomfort with change and a fear of losing relevance. The deeper he went, the more Kevin understood that Kennedy's decisions weren't about ego or power, but about doing what was right for the public. Eventually, Kevin asked to meet with Kennedy. When the moment came, he sat face to face with the man he'd once openly doubted. Mr. Kennedy, Kevin began, I need to apologize, not just for the words I spoke, but for resisting without understanding. I realize now that the changes you're making are necessary, even if they're uncomfortable. I was wrong to mock them, and I was wrong to doubt you. Kennedy listened without interruption, and when Kevin finished, he nodded thoughtfully. Kevin, he said, owning up to a mistake takes strength. Everyone falters at some point. What matters is how we learn from it. Your apology is accepted, but remember this. For a team to thrive, trust and respect must always come first. If we lose those, nothing else we do will matter. Kevin left that meeting a changed man, humbled but wiser. For the department, the incident became a story that was shared often, A cautionary tale of the dangers of letting pride get in the way of progress, and an example of how leadership isn't just about making tough decisions, but also about forgiveness. Kennedy had demonstrated what it meant to lead with purpose, reminding everyone that real leadership is rooted in principles, not power.